Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we're diving into the oddly complicated world of forgiveness, which, despite sounding like something your grandmother might advise you to do after Sunday dinner, actually has a very real, very juicy psychological foundation. And spoiler alert, it's not just about being a good person, it's actually about hacking your own brain so you don't drown in bitterness and cortisol. So, forgiveness. That ancient, mystical, self-help book-friendly concept where you're supposed to let go of your seething rage at someone who wronged you, smile warmly, and feel spiritually enlightened. Sounds great on paper, but in practice it's more like, yes, Brenda, I forgive you for stealing my stapler at work, while secretly fantasizing about supergluing her keyboard. Before I forget, I'd love for you to share either an experience where you were able to forgive someone and noticed the positive effects, or a time when you couldn't forgive, and how that held you back. So what exactly is forgiveness? Psychologically speaking, forgiveness is the conscious decision to let go of resentment, anger, or the urge for revenge against someone who wronged you. Importantly, this doesn't mean you condone what they did. It also doesn't mean you forget. You're not erasing your memory like some kind of budget, eternal sunshine of the spotless mind knockoff. Forgiveness just means you've stopped mentally rewatching the wrong they did to you on loop like a bad Netflix show you can't quit. The idea has been studied for decades. Psychologist Everett Worthington is one of the big names here, especially with his REACH model of forgiveness. That's an acronym for steps like recall, empathize, altruistic gift, commit, and hold. Which sounds inspiring, but really just means stop plotting imaginary arguments in the shower and move on. But here's the funny part. Forgiveness is less about being nice to the person who hurt you, and more about being nice to your own nervous system. See, holding a grudge is basically like signing up for a lifetime gym membership in stress. Your heart rate goes up, your blood pressure spikes, your immune system weakens. Chronic resentment is like emotional junk food. It feels satisfying in the moment, but leaves your brain sluggish and bloated afterward. One study at Hope College actually found that when people imagined forgiving someone, their heart rates and blood pressure dropped compared to when they imagined holding a grudge. So yes, your body can literally feel the difference between let it go and plot their downfall. Now you might be thinking, okay fine, forgiveness is healthier. But what about justice? Shouldn't people be held accountable? And the answer is, of course. Forgiveness does not replace accountability. It doesn't cancel consequences. It's more like saying, I'm not going to let your nonsense live rent-free in my head anymore. Think of it this way. Not forgiving someone is like swallowing poison and waiting for the other person to keel over. Meanwhile, they're probably out living their life, completely unaware that you're still mentally replaying that one conversation from 1998. But here's where it gets weird. Humans are not naturally great at forgiveness. From an evolutionary standpoint, it actually made sense to hold grudges. If a fellow cave person stole your mammoth steak, you needed to remember that betrayal so you didn't share with them again. Forgetting would have been a recipe for starvation. So our brains evolved to hold on to grudges like prized collectibles. It's like our prehistoric version of Yelp reviews. Do not trade with grog. Very untrustworthy. 1 star. And yet, in the modern world, we're stuck with this ancient hardware in situations that don't require it. Brenda stealing your stapler is not a life-or-death mammoth steak situation. But your brain doesn't care. It says danger, betrayal. Store this in high-definition 4K memory forever. Now let's talk about what actually helps people forgive. Research suggests there are 2 big psychological factors, empathy and perspective taking. When you try to understand the offender's point of view, you're more likely to soften your stance. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting you empathize with every terrible person. Nobody's saying, oh yes, the scammer who stole my money was probably just having a rough week, bless his heart. But empathy can sometimes reduce the intensity of the grudge, making it easier to let go. There's also the concept of self-forgiveness, which frankly is even trickier. People are often harder on themselves than they are on others. You might forgive your friend for forgetting your birthday, but beat yourself up for forgetting theirs until the heat death of the universe. And self-forgiveness is messy because it involves both responsibility and release. You have to admit you did something wrong, and then decide you're not going to torture yourself about it forever. Basically, it's the psychological equivalent of cleaning your room. Yes, it's your mess, but you also deserve to live in a space that doesn't smell like guilt. Now here's something counterintuitive. Forgiveness can actually make you feel more powerful. People often imagine forgiveness as weakness, like you're letting someone walk all over you. But studies show it can increase feelings of control because you're choosing not to let someone else dictate your emotional state. It's like saying, "Congratulations, you wronged me. But I'm not auditioning for the role of a lifelong victim in your personal drama. I'm cancelling this show." Let's spice things up with some research highlights. There was a study at Stanford where people went through a 9-hour forgiveness training program. Yes, 9 hours. Because apparently people will sit through an entire season of The Bachelor, but need structured classes to learn how to stop being bitter. The results? Those who completed the program reported less anger, less depression, and more optimism, which makes sense. Forgiveness is basically like uninstalling malware from your brain. Another fascinating bit of research is from Enright and colleagues, who found that forgiveness interventions reduced anxiety and increased hope. And here's the kicker. Even when people were wronged in very serious ways, like by family members, forgiveness training still worked, which means there's hope for the rest of us and our stapler drama. Of course, there are limits. Forgiveness doesn't mean staying in toxic relationships, or excusing abuse, or pretending nothing happened. Sometimes the healthiest form of forgiveness is saying, "I wish you well from over here, behind this very large boundary." And let's not forget, humans are wildly inconsistent with forgiveness. You might forgive a friend for showing up late, but never forgive your sibling for borrowing your favourite sweater in 2004. Forgiveness is not a neat formula. It's more like a psychological slot machine. Sometimes you hit empathy, sometimes you hit rage, sometimes you hit the jackpot of indifference. Now, you may be wondering, but what if I just can't forgive? And that's fair. Not forgiving is also a choice. The key is recognizing the cost of that choice. Holding on to resentment can give you a short-term sense of moral superiority, like you're a judge on some grand cosmic court. But long-term, you're basically just sentencing yourself to chronic stress. So the next time your brain tries to convince you that forgiveness is optional, remember this. Forgiveness is not for them. It's for you. They don't even need to know you forgave them. Honestly, they probably won't care. Forgiveness is more like cleaning up your own psychological hard drive so you stop glitching. So to wrap this up, forgiveness is not about being a saint. It's not about letting people off the hook. It's about reclaiming your energy, your health, and your sanity. It lowers your stress, strengthens your immune system, and helps you stop mentally starring in your own revenge fantasy sitcom. And honestly, in a world where people cut each other off in traffic and argue about pineapple on pizza, forgiveness might just be the best survival skill we have. So yeah, letting go really is good for you. Not because it makes the other person better, but because it stops you from slowly poisoning yourself with resentment. Alright, thanks for listening to this ramble from your friendly semi-professional psychologist. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment telling me what absurdly human psychological phenomenon you want me to dissect next. And if you don't, well, I'll forgive you, eventually.